This is TechKnow, a show about innovations that can change lives.
The science of fighting a wildfire.
We're going to explore the intersection of hardware and humanity, and we're doing it in a unique way. This is a show about science by scientists. Let's check out our team of hardcore nerds. Marita Davison is a biologist specializing in ecology and evolution. Tonight, TechKnow investigates fracking.
I walk out the front door and I'm like, where did my yard go?
This isn't earthquake country, but the ground is shaking. Is the fracking process to blame?
This station is right on top of the earthquakes.
So this is the epicenter.
This is right on the epicenter.
Now seismologists dig deep to solve the controversy.
Do you think that you'll get the answers that you're hoping to get?
Then, a possible solution.
It has a distinct odor.
Dr. Crystal Dilworth is a molecular neuroscientist. Tonight, a new way to deal with fracking wastewater.
Yes, well, it's the odor of money for the Texas people.
Money for some, oily, nasty, dirty for me.
I'm Phil Torres. I'm an entomologist. Dispatches from outer space
Chocolate pudding cake.
are out of this world.
Time to cut your fingernails in 0G.
My one-on-one
If you keep crying, you just ended up with a bigger ball of water.
with the YouTube astronaut. That's our team. Now let's do some science.
So what is this?
Hey guys, welcome to TechKnow. I'm Phil Torres, joined by Dr. Crystal Dilworth and Marita Davison. Guys, in today's episode, we have a big one. Fracking. It has done a lot for America's energy independence. We now produce more natural gas than any other country, but it doesn't come without controversy, potentially doesn't come without cost.
Yeah, fracking is hugely controversial, right? Lots of ramifications that range the gamut from environmental to health. And Texas has really been kind of at the center point of a lot of the intersections of this issue, whether they're economic, environmental, political. Texas is kind of right there in the mix.
Right, when we think of Texas, we think big oil. We don't think earthquakes like you would if you're thinking about California, but they're experiencing seismic activity.
So we got to see how one small town in Texas is dealing with this big national issue. Let's check it out.
We were sitting in the living room one night watching TV, and there was a tremendous explosion, it sounded like, and then the whole house shook.
Then the next day there was another one, and they just kept coming. And that's whenever we realized we definitely have a problem. We should not be having earthquakes in Texas.
This isn't earthquake country. This is Reno, Texas, population 3,200, and just 13 square miles long. If any place is small-town America, Reno is. Residents know each other, and they know something's changed in their town.
See, it's right here. Look, I'm just kind of creep in here. Right there, see how my foot keeps going?
Barbara Brown is a community activist and a longtime resident of Reno, Texas.
Yeah, this is definitely a concern.
And Reno is not alone. Colorado, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Ohio, and the rest of eastern Texas, all places not known for seismic activity, are suddenly on the earthquake map. According to scientists at the U.S. Geological Survey, over the past few years, within the central and eastern United States, nearly 450 earthquakes, magnitude 3.0 and larger, occurred from 2010 to 2013. Compared with 20 quakes per year from 1970 to 2000. Data that is beginning to show stories like Barbara's are all too real.
The earthquake came and went through the center of the house, everything shook. I walk out the front door and I'm like, where did my yard go?
Brown lives less than a mile away from what she and others in this area believe is the cause of the quakes. Hydraulic fracturing, more commonly known as fracking, is a process in which water mixed with sand, salt, and chemicals is pumped into underground rock formations to release oil and gas. Once the job is done, fracking fluids are pulled back out of the ground. This byproduct of oil and gas extraction is identified as fracking wastewater and is considered too contaminated to use. In Texas and several other states, injection wells store the contaminated water that's used to frack. The water is driven to wells like these. then injected deep into the ground where it can stay for years to come. It's this process that many suspect is increasing the seismic activity in the Azle-Reno area. We met with the mayor of Reno, Texas, Linda Stokes.
Well, I'm very concerned when this is an area that's never had quakes.
Mayor Stokes took us to the site of a nearby injection well.
As you can see, there actually is a truck that's pumping right now. And this one is actually the one that is the closest to or is the epicenter of the earthquakes.
Wow. According to the Texas Railroad Commission, XTO Energy, a subsidiary of ExxonMobil, owns this disposal well. Mayor Stokes expressed her opinion on the cause of the increase in earthquakes in the area.
You know, there's no beating around the bush. Yes, they are causing this increased activity. The more horizontal fracking and drilling that we have, the more problems, the more wastewater, the more injected into the ground we're doing, and it's opening fault lines that aren't open at the moment.
In a prepared statement, XTO, the company that owns this disposal well, told TechKnow, based on analysis of engineering data and scientific study performed to date, XTO does not believe its Westlake well caused any of the seismic events. It's a sensitive issue. When Mayor Stokes took us to a nearby fracking site, also owned by XTO, a driver began taking pictures of us on a cell phone. Residents of Reno and Azle are taking action.
The quake started recently, and it woke me up. I thought a 747 landed on my roof.
In a round of highly publicized hearings at the Texas State Capitol, citizens voiced their complaints to the Railroad Commission of Texas. The Railroad Commission is a state agency that regulates the gas and oil industry, including drilling and disposal wells located throughout the state.
How would you like to have it where you can't have your grandkids come over to play in their yard? Because if they fall in a sinkhole, they'll break their leg.
In response to public pressure, the RRC has imposed regulations that will require oil and gas companies to research an area's earthquake history before drilling new injection wells.
Well, I live 0.96 miles from an injection well that the USGS, the EPA, the Texas Railroad Commission, and their geologists as well, all foresaid is the epicenter of the earthquakes that was caused in the Reno-Azle area.
What are you hoping to achieve?
Hopefully, they would at least take the research that they have at hand and say, let's lower the rate that we're injecting these fluids. Let's have someone come out and map the area and check for fault lines.
Southern Methodist University geophysicist Heather Deshawn is investigating the Reno-Azle cluster of quakes at the U.S. Geological Survey's request.
We're currently looking at seismicity occurring outside of Fort Worth in the towns of Reno and Azle. We are doing modeling to try to figure out how the oil and gas activity relates or changes stress along these pre-existing faults.
On a personal level, how concerned are you about these earthquakes that are happening in your backyard?
My biggest concern is that something in the 4.5 range will occur in a highly populated area like the Dallas-Fort Worth area where the built environment is not built up to standards for those considerations.
It was an incredibly loud boom, and then maybe a second or two later we actually felt a vibration.
It wasn't culture shock that jolted Englishman turned Texas rancher David Andrews. It was an unexpected earthquake in November 2013 that rattled his Reno home.
Half a second, maybe a second, there was the whole tremoring of the house. It was unusual.
Scary. David, do you think that the injector wells are part of the problem here?
Yes, I do. I really do. It's a very complex question and maybe not one for a rancher to answer, right?
Despite the lack of published scientific findings so far, David, like many residents in this gas-rich area, believe there is a connection between the initial cluster of 15 quakes, plus thousands of much smaller quakes, and the gas industry's practice of injecting hydraulic fracturing wastewater into deep underground disposal wells. It's a claim the industry denies.
Is it the gas and oil companies? Is it natural? We really don't know.
And is it that question mark that has made you open to letting the SMU team set up here?
Yes, I'm very excited.
That's your
And I
thing.
said, come on guys, come on in, bring it in. Of course, the downside of that is I was chosen because we're right on top of the earthquake.
Planted on David's farm is one of 14 sensors in the area, streaming live seismic data to researchers at Southern Methodist University. The goal is to find out if the quakes on long dormant faults are natural or man-made.
All right.
So this station is right on top of the earthquakes. They're right underneath us from 2 to 5 to 8 kilometers down.
Wow.
This is the acquisition system and records the signals coming down these wires, which are buried out under the ground. They're about 6 feet down.
So these are the wires that are hooked up to the
Yes.
seismometer?
Right. There are 2 seismometers at this place, one that records only vertical and then one that records all 3 components of motion. Right now we're recording at 200 samples per second.
Is the seismometer sensing that we're here?
Yes, it is. If
Okay.
you'll just jump up.
Okay.
Okay. And there it is.
Yeah.
So, yes, we're good to go.
Why can't you take the data that's collected from these stations and draw a correlation there?
Well, in this case, the injectors are over a mile away, and it would take time for any fluid, any activity at the injector to migrate into the fault here, which causes the earthquakes. Maybe over a year, maybe 2 years.
Does that mean that these really aren't induced earthquakes?
No, and the only way that we can approach that right now is with modeling.
So we packed up the gear and headed to the lab at SMU.
Some stations were actually getting the data.
Geophysicist Heather Deshawn is crunching the data.
And it's incredibly important to understand where the events are actually occurring, what faults are actually being activated, how long those faults are. Each individual circle is an earthquake that we've recorded. There are a little over 300 events.
Normally, an earthquake is followed by an expected series of frequent aftershocks of smaller magnitude. The scientific term is B-value of 1. So is that essentially what we're seeing in these 300 points?
Yeah.
A pattern of aftershock?
In fact, the first Azle earthquake was in the 3 range, and then there was a 3.6, and then a 3.2, and then a couple of mid-3s, and then another 3.6. So we wouldn't consider that a traditional main shock aftershock sequence because the first earthquake was not, in fact, the largest earthquake. On the other hand, the sort of scaling we're seeing where for every 3 we see 10 2s, and for every 2 we see 100 1s, that's consistent with a standard tectonic earthquake sequence.
The activity is along a narrow line as little as 2 kilometers from a frac waste injection well.
Faults that are millions of years old, hundreds of million years old, have been reactivated.
One hypothesis, you alluded to it already, is that injection of water is potentially causing, or one of the causes of this increased seismic activity. Can you walk me through that hypothesis?
So with injection, you're putting a lot of fluids into a unit that might be faulted.
Will you ever be able to tell definitively whether water disposal into injection wells is causing the increased incidence of earthquakes?
It's incredibly difficult to show whether or not an individual earthquake sequence is natural or not.
In a statement to TechKnow, XTO, a subsidiary of ExxonMobil, noted it fully supports the SMU study and added possible factors to be assessed like lake levels, effects of extreme drought, aquifer levels, natural earth movements, and disposal and production wells. Do you think that you'll get the answers that you're hoping to get?
I don't know if they can definitively apportion blame and say who's responsible for these. I don't believe we can suddenly say we need to stop drilling for gas and oil here, because what alternative do we have?
One alternative to injecting frac water into wells, reusing it. TechKnow's Dr. Crystal Dilworth has that story.
And back here is our big demonstration.
1,400 miles from Azle, this warehouse in Los Angeles could be the epicenter for the future of fracking.
So what is this?
This we call Gen 2. This unit is able to process about 3,000 barrels a day of dirty water. It's about 500,000 gallons a day.
That's just a drop in the frac water bucket. But Origin Oil's chemical-free system is already recycling frac waste at production sites in Texas and Colorado. I got a small-scale demonstration.
What type of liquid are we processing?
We don't have oil-filled materials. So we've collected some waste oil, nasty stuff.
It has a distinct odor.
Yes, well, it's the odor of money for the Texas people.
Can you walk me through it?
Absolutely. The first stage uses long tubes that you see underneath here. And these tubes resonate with electricity to cause the oil and chemicals to coagulate into clumps. The problem then is how to get the clumps out of the water. So then there's a second stage here where the material goes into the tub, and these long tubes generates these micro bubbles that push the material to the top. And there's a rake that gets it onto this beach where it gets pushed off. The material's gone off this conveyor belt, and meanwhile you can see this clear water.
And bubbles are continuing to help the coagulate come to the top.
Absolutely.
How do you convince a big oil company to use something like this?
Our process actually makes it possible to reuse on site and to get fresh water where you are generating it. And that's a huge benefit because water costs money to transport. And if you can get that result immediately, you can reuse it right on the spot, and you get this huge cost savings.
And this is the future of fracking?
The future of fracking is totally about the water. If we're going to frack a lot, and the world is moving towards a lot of fracking, we've got to conserve the water.
So Crystal, what did you bring us?
I brought some samples from the water purification process. So what you have here, this lovely, very edible looking mixture, is the type of water that comes out of the fracking process. This is what would be going into the disposal well. It contains oil, it contains sediment. So this is after one round of purification. So most of the oil and some of the organics and sediment has been removed, and you can see it's a little cleaner. It's more like chocolate milk, but still probably not something that you would want to drink. And this is the final stage in the process. Now, you wouldn't want to drink this either. It still contains chemicals, and this is not pure water, but it's pure enough to be reused for fracking and not have to be disposed of in a well. I use a similar process when I'm working with bacteria in the lab when I'm talking about microliters of solution. But the challenge is scaling it up for the millions and millions of barrels of water that are needed for fracking activity.
What do you think? Do you think it's doable?
Well, I think Origin Oil thinks that they have one step towards a solution, but every little bit helps. This is one drop in the bucket of a bigger problem, but at least we're working on it and moving forward.
I really feel like we need to sit down the industry, the scientists, and the government, put them in a room for a week and let them hash it out and figure this controversy out.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, as some of the folks in the piece mentioned, you don't want to sacrifice your daily conveniences, right? You want those to stay intact. So there has to be an alternative solution that meets all of those requirements, all of those standards, and can exceed them.
Right, and that speaks to the complexity of the issue that Phil was mentioning. I mean, we need a multifaceted approach to find an answer.
Guys, if you know science and if you know the internet at all, you've probably seen the face of Commander Chris Hadfield, and I got the chance to interview him.
Those videos are incredible and really making space travel and just this whole idea so cool again. It's fantastic.
He gave us a window into his world and a way for those of us that aren't living on the International Space Station to kind of have an understanding of what that experience is like and maybe imagine ourselves in space one day.
And I had a chance to talk to him about all of those amazing things. Let's take a look.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff of Tom Marshburn, Roman Romanenko, and Chris Hadfield making their way towards the International Space Station.
The International Space Station has long been a paragon of scientific mystery. That is until one man brought it back down to Earth.
Chocolate pudding cake. Looks like it too. Not bad. Gonna be hard to eat. Gonna be messy.
Chris Hadfield, the former commander of the International Space Station, spent 166 days in space. But he didn't spend his time just doing experiments. Instead, he turned the space station into something really cool. He recorded videos that went crazy viral, while bringing space into America's living rooms once again. Not exactly your usual astronaut. I gotta say, some of those images that you took and the captions you put with them and the videos you did, they are some of the best things on the internet.
Vegetables are important for your health, and so today I've chosen dried spinach. Stick my straw in, mix it up. Hot. So now I have a nice wet toothbrush.
When you did the wringing out the towel video, my mind was blown and I showed it to everyone.
Yeah, so provocative. If you grab a glass of water and I tip it over or I let go of it, everybody assumes what's going to happen. And if something unexpected happens, if the water doesn't spill out or if it floats here in front of my hand, it's kind of startling. And the beauty of being startled is it changes your thoughts. It changes your perspective.
It's the little things we take for granted on Earth that Hadfield highlights perfectly. Take getting ready to sleep, for example.
In my super comfy Russian full-length pajamas.
When it's bedtime, you turn off all the lights on the station and then you float into your sleeping bag. We sleep in little sleep stations, or like a tiny little phone booth. You pull the little doors shut and then shut off the light and then relax every muscle in your body. Each muscle goes to its natural relaxed state, like an infant. I mean, we go to the fetal position, basically. It is the most blissful, comfortable sleep you could ever imagine.
Sleeping is not the only challenge. Even trying to groom can get a little messy.
I noticed recently that my fingernails are getting a little long. So it's time to cut your fingernails in 0G. How do you do it? What we've decided to do up here is go to an air duct where the air is pulled in. Cut my nails right here over the top so that my fingernails will all get pulled down into the vent and not float away.
And there's no crying in space either, or at least crying like we're used to.
So if you keep crying, you just end up with a bigger and bigger ball of water in your eye.
Despite this lack of creature comforts, research opportunities aboard the space station are literally out of this world. Commander Hadfield learned as much as possible during his time on the ISS.
One more task accomplished in a day on space station.
We need more of that, right? I mean, we need more Commander Hatfields out there, being honest and candid and funny and, just kind of goofing off and also really being serious about the science that they do and the perspective that they have. We need it.
Now that he has a lot of Twitter followers, what is he going to do with those tweets? How is he going to reach individuals, excite the next generation of rocket scientists and astronauts?
For me, I was thinking, oh, hey, I would like to do that. I think I can do that, and I think that's really great.
Well, really interesting stuff today, guys. We dealt with the controversy, and we saw some true scientific inspiration, and I can't wait to do it all again. If you want to see more, be sure to tune in next time here on TechKnow.
Dive deep into these stories and go behind the scenes at aljazeera.com/techknow. Follow our expert contributors on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Google+, and more.